passage. We'll quickly read and summarize the passage and then answer the questions. As the COVID 19 pandemic entered its third year with inflation rising and the supply chain faltering, many American voters were fixated not on the economy or on the virus, but on quite a different topic. What was that? Education. So, as COVID entered its third year, what was the major obsession of Americans? According to the author, it was education. In Virginia, a private equity multimillionaire won the governor's race by promising to keep public schools safe from gender neutral bathrooms, critical race theory. So, these political issues, he says he would keep the public schools free from them. Across the country, school board meetings were disrupted by death threats and chanted slogans. School board elections became pitched battles. So, board elections became battles. Battles over what? Questions like history textbooks, mask mandates, and the content of school libraries. What are these issues? So, why was education the main thing? Because governors promised, okay, if you elect me, this will be the policy in the schools. We will not have critical race theory. We'll keep schools away from all these issues. These are all political issues. Second thing, school boards also were disrupted by people saying, threatening them with guns and chants, slogan chanting. Not just that, when board elections were happening, they were not fought on issues on what kind of education. They were fought on issues like history textbook, what should be part of the history textbook, mask mandates, which is a very political thing in the US, and the content of school libraries. So, therefore, it was basically saying that politicization of education, or rather, how to keep politics away from education. What was the issue? The issue was this, that there was the problem with education was too much of politics were involved in education. That's what the first paragraph tells us. Political experts and campaign consultants were taken by surprise when schools suddenly assumed center stage in the national debate. So, political experts were totally surprised. Why? Because one of the major issues of political debates was schools. But our recent battles are nothing new. The author says there's nothing new in what's happening. Schools have always been tangled up with politics for millennia. For many, many years, the schools and politics are intertwined. They have served what? What is that they referring to? Schools. Schools have served as a proxy battlefield for cultural warriors of every stripe. So, cultural battles are fought. Fought where? In schools. Syllabi, teaching, it can be anything. That's what the author says. Especially in moments of national crisis or social upheavals, classrooms have often provided the clearest reflection of a society's deep anxiety about identity, power, and class. So, this is a very important point the author is raising. During a national crisis, during social upheaval, schools are the centers where the you get a reflection of a society's anxiety about identity, power, and class. Schools reflects this. Schools reflect this. A society's problems, anxieties about what? Identity, power, and class. So schools are the places where these issues have always been there. Author says there's nothing new in politics, and in the connection between politics and school. Identity politics, power politics, class politics have always been part of the school culture, according to the author. In Texas, where I live, those anxieties have been on full display in recent months. He says, the author is from Texas. He says these anxieties about identity, class, all this are there, have been reflected in schools in recent months. For example, the recently passed House bill requires social studies teachers to explore controversial issues from diverse and contending perspectives without giving deference to any one perspective. So when you teach social studies, teachers have been asked to take diverse and contending, means opposing perspectives on issues, and not support anyone. say this was correct or this was wrong. Don't take any sides. After the governor signed the bill into law, an administrator in a school district near Fort Worth informed teachers that they were now required, when assigning books describing the evils of the Holocaust, to include texts that offered opposing perspectives as well. Holocaust, one of the most tragic events in human history, where the Nazis literally gassed 6 million Jews, was one of the worst things in history. Here, after the passing of the bill, teachers have been told, you give the Nazi viewpoint also, give the opposing viewpoint also, not just the perspective of the Jews, of Holocaust, what happened, how Jews were exterminated, not just that, give the opposing perspective as well. So what does that mean? It soon became apparent that Texas's new law was intended not so much to protect academic freedom as to curtail it in highly specific ways. So it was not meant to further academic freedom, it was meant to restrict academic freedom. Now you cannot, whatever you're telling in history, give it from both perspectives. So when you teach the Holocaust, when you teach anything, give both the perspectives. So academic freedom, a teacher doesn't have the freedom to say it, to take a side and say this was what happened, this was what went wrong. So instead of having academic freedom to teach what I believe is correct, I have my freedom to teach has been restricted by the passing of this law in Texas. That's what the author says. For instance, the law carves out a notable exception to its doctrine, diverse and contending perspectives in the classroom. Now, here it said diverse and contending perspectives. You have to show varied perspectives. Don't show only one view of history. Show different views of history. Diverse and contending. They can conflict with each other. They can oppose each other. Show it. But the law itself has made an exception to it. How? Slavery and racism must now be taught in our public schools in one way and one way only. What is that? As deviations from, betrayals of, or failures to live up to the authentic founding principles of the United States, which include liberty and equality. So, how does this law make an exception to its own diverse and contending perspective? Now, slavery and racism is a part of US culture. Slavery was there for a very long time. It was abolished pretty late in the day. He says that must be taught as what? As deviations from and betrayals of the founding principles of the Constitution. The founding fathers had made the Constitution in one way. They believed in the principles of liberty and equality. These practices of slavery and racism were against the core principles of the founding fathers. Right? So, what's wrong with that? Texas social studies teachers may want to skip over the authentic founding principle enshrined in Article 1 of the Constitution. Now, Article 1 of the Constitution, in the authentic founding principle of the Constitution, Article 1, what did it say? Anyone who was enslaved was counted as 3/5 of a person. That part shouldn't be mentioned. Right? So, he says, Texas social studies may want to skip over the authentic founding principle enshrined in Article 1 that anyone who was a slave was not considered a full person, only 3/5 of a person. That was our passage. Which of the following best explains the intent, purpose of the author behind writing the first paragraph? First paragraph, what did he say? He talked about how uh, uh, there have been debates, there have been pitched battles in school board elections on history textbooks, racism, what should be included, what shouldn't be included. Right? Let's quickly go back to the first paragraph and see what was there. COVID-19. First thing he says that Americans in the third year of the COVID pandemic are not bothered about the pandemic so much as education. And why is that? Because a person won governor's race in Virginia by saying there are certain issues, gender neutral bathrooms, race theory will protect the school. So that became a political issue. Like what should be taught in a school, what should not be taught, what should be done. Second part, across the country, school board meetings were disrupted by slogan chanting and death threats. Again, politicization of education. of school boards, school board meetings, disruptions on political matters. Third, school board elections became pitched battles over history textbooks, mask mandates, and the contents of school library. So, what is the intention behind this? To tell you how politics, how education became a political issue and give you instances where this has happened, right? Let's look at the option which goes with this answer. To introduce the issue of politicization of education to the reader. Looks like a good one. He talks about how politics, how school, how education got entangled with politics, how politics became prevalent in all school education related activities. One looks correct. Let's quickly look at the other options before we eliminate. Whenever A turns out to be the right option, spend some time to look at B, C, D, and E to eliminate it. Introduce the reader to the violent debates in education. That's only one aspect, right? To opine how some important issues have taken a backseat in the light of debate in education. Education is also important. He didn't say about what issues took a backseat. To him, politicization of education is an important factor. The author says that should be, I mean, we get the feeling that he obviously doesn't agree with it. So C is out of scope. To substantiate the current debates in public schools, the examples is not about debate in public schools. The example is about how education has become politicized. It's not about debates that are happening in public schools. It's about debates involving education in general, not just public schools, right? So this is again too narrow in scope. To introduce how battles of ideology are surprisingly being fought. It's not so much ideology, the debate is about politics in education. Therefore, I know that A is the perfect answer.